You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio. So hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of Changing Reality. So welcome one, welcome all. If this is your first time tuning in, where have you been all your life? This is the place to be. If you're a returning audience, welcome back to the show. We love having you here always as we do every week. So if you're new, Changing Reality is a show that features phenomenal people from all walks of life, who are in essence changing their own reality. And we'll be hanging out and interviewing these brilliant people, from social change makers, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, business owners, to even artists, musicians, and inspiring individuals from all across the world, with the hopes of uncovering their stories, their little secrets and tips and tricks that we can use to not only chart our own courses, but to learn the lessons that we need to change our own reality in turn. And I wanted to do this show simply because I believe that there are a lot of people out there who do phenomenal things and make waves in the lives of those around them. And I'm super passionate about uncovering those stories and learning how they're doing that so that we can replicate them in our own lives. And the power of stories has been something that has personally helped me so much, has helped all the people around me. And to show you how much I believe in it, I actually personally founded and run a youth movement from the power of stories called Ascendance. And Ascendance started off in Malaysia, which is where I'm from, but today collaborates with not just our Malaysian Ministry of Education, but over 28 countries to help provide an alternative education platform for any student who wants to change their reality. So we work with students from elementary all the way up to college through various sessions, experiential learning programs, activities, projects that help them discover what they love doing, go out there and get meaningful experiences, real-world experiences, and come back and actually start their own careers that creates impact not just for themselves, but for those around them too. And as I said, we've been very fortunate to work with over 35,000 students, 970 over communities, and have incubated countless number of student-run projects and social enterprises run by students as young as 8 to 25 years old. And the foundation of all of that has been stories, has been kind individuals who've been willing to share their stories, share their experiences with others who maybe would never have gotten the chance to hear, to experience these things, so that it can shorten their learning curves as well. And just like that, I hope that this show is that same platform for you, so that all of you listening in today can take the lessons that our speakers are here to talk about and implement them in your own lives. So if there's anything that you want to talk about specifically, whether it's a particular career, a particular skill, or whether it's just something that you are passionate about learning about more, let us know, and we'll do our best to feature it some way or another on this show and bring to you the things that you need to change your own reality. So on to today's episode. Today we have someone truly, truly phenomenal. Our speaker today is the Director of Community and Partnerships at PlanetMark. PlanetMark being a sustainable certification which proactively supports hundreds of organizations and real estate developments committed to making progress towards net zero carbon. A huge issue in 2022 today, when everyone knows how serious the climate change is getting. And they have a proven track record for success. Some of their members, they've even reduced their absolute carbon emission by 12% back in 2019 prior to COVID, and almost up to 25%. I think the exact number is 24.5% in 2020 during COVID in a sense. And our speaker started at PlanetMark leading all things in their digital community and engagement and partnership sections, but today moved on to his to leading their head of engagement and digital, while allowing many other efforts that he has actually spearheaded grow in turn. So other than being phenomenal at his career, he does so many other great things, or has created so much impact in his community. He's the chair of the National Sustainability Task Force at the Institute of Directors, a thriving member community for directors in and out of the UK, as well as was a TEDx speaker, sharing a little bit on the art of meaningful networking, a very, very useful and heartwarming talk that you guys should check out after this. And he's also someone who's pioneered brilliant projects, from hosting virtual and physical workshops on innovation to even collaborating with phenomenal individuals such as Disney's former head of innovation and creativity, Duncan Wardle, to actually, with his team, host over 250 virtual workshops and webinars on innovation. And that is just kind of some of the more recent things that he's done. Prior to that, he even helped build out LinkedIn local through his role as the chief community enthusiast at Local X. That work impacted over 90 countries, 950 towns and cities, and I think there were over 2,000 hosts around the world in less than 2 years. And in 2019, when they concluded this project, they actually handed the community over to LinkedIn and actually secured their permission to use their branding and actually dedicate and actually formalize that in a sense. So someone who has had so much brilliant impact on the community, who has given back so much to all of us out there, and many who probably benefit from the work that he does. So today, without further ado, let's welcome our phenomenal speaker, Andrew, onto our virtual stage.
Hi, Harsha. Pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining. I think I need a cup of tea after your introduction.
that was a very robust introduction, I must say.
I'm a little stressed out now, so honestly, I could have done less things to make my job a little easier, in the introduction. Like, why do you have to make so much impact and make the rest of us feel terrible? But thank you for being on the show. And one of the things that I really like about you and the things that I've read up about you is that you have done so many different things in kind of the same thread of creating a change in the community, which I think is brilliant. I think it's something that all of us Gen Zs, in a sense, want to do. I think all of us innately have this need to give back, this need to kind of make the world a better place, but we don't always know how best to apply that or how best to do that in a sense. For you, when did you first realize that you wanted to make a change in the community, or that giving back or building the community in turn was something important to you?
I mean, I've always been sort of a sociable character. I'm someone who I'm an extrovert. I get my energy from being around other people, and so I think I've always sort of naturally leaned into those sorts of things. And I think the word you used around there being sort of common thread and there being a thread is a good sort of metaphor for it, where in my career path and in the things that I've gotten involved in, it is kind of like finding a thread and then just keep on pulling on it. and because if you'd asked me even 5 years ago, what would I have thought I'd be doing now, not only would I have been wrong, I'd have probably undershot. I'd have probably said something less. If I'd told you what my ideal job was 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have said something that's as good as I'm doing now. I was dreaming too low. And so I think the journey that you sort of head on is, I did a lot of exploring. I tried lots of different, roles and things. I studied psychology at my undergraduate, as my undergraduate degree. And I explored, should I become a clinical psychologist? Should I go into research and do neuroscience? And I've still got these fascinations, but I kept on pulling on threads, and I'd sort of sense out something and say, oh, do I want to be a lab researcher? No, it's too isolating. It's too much alone time. I want to be around people. Okay, so not lab research. What about doing clinical psychologist? That could be a good path, but you are going to still be studying until you're in your early 30s, getting a clinical doctorate and everything. Actually, and gradually, bit by bit by bit, by finding things I didn't enjoy or didn't quite fit right, I kept pulling that thread, and gradually it sort of led me in the right direction. And then it's one of these things that sort of builds on you. So you just keep exploring, expose yourself to as many different opportunities as you can, connect with people who interest you and who, exactly like you're doing, Harsha. It's a very smart way of hearing different stories and different journeys, because each one is unique and yours will be unique. But you find something that feels right and then start pulling on it. And sometimes you'll come off path and sort of keep that sense of, am I on the right track or not? And you'll get that sense as to, oh, something's not quite right. I'm not in the right place right now for where I want to be. And you sort of explore that, okay, well, which direction is my instinct taking me in? So pull that thread.
No, very, very well said. And I think someone once told me, finding your passion is essentially being blindfolded in a dark room. And you there's a light somewhere. It's just that you're not sure where it is, in a sense. And you're essentially bumping around things until you find it. And I like that analogy of kind of pulling thread until you find it. Because I feel like sometimes especially when we're in school, we always have this romantic ideal of finding your passion, where it's essentially love at first sight. You get struck by lightning. Oh gosh, this is the thing I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on us to kind of have everything figured out. Where in reality, I think most people do not have everything figured out, or aren't exactly sure what they want to do forever and ever, but have a sense.
I'm still not. Let's be clear. I don't think, and I think anyone who has that level of certainty, I've often seen it backfire, where they've achieved what they wanted to achieve, and they go, well, shit, what now? People, it really doesn't go well if people have that level of, no, this is definitely, I've had friends who are like, the whole way through school, I want to be a PE teacher. I want to be a PE teacher. I want to be a PE teacher. They went to like a month of like university to go and become a PE teacher and hated it. And it's I think it's really dangerous. Well, personally, I can't remember who. I think it might have been. I think it was a US president actually. I think it might have been Gerald Ford or someone. But basically said and it's used within the context of battles and war, and it's sort of like having a plan is useless. When you get into battle, a plan is useless, but the act of planning is invaluable. And so I think going through the journey of have plans, have intentions, but focus on something where you're not necessarily determining the outcome. I tend to look at 5 years ahead and I'm like, what sort of life do I want to be leading? Where do I want to be? What sort of environment do I want to be in? What sort of career do I want to have? What do I want that to feel like? I don't tend to put specifics on it around saying, I want to be in this job title, earning this amount of money, doing this thing. It's something much more about what life do I want to have? What balance in my life do I want to have? And focus on that. And then, in your short-term planning, look at, okay, well, what is going to move me in that direction? Am I getting closer or am I getting further? It's a very straightforward question. In every action you take in your day, if you've set certain goals and objectives for yourself in terms of this is what I would like to be doing, in terms of the impact I'd like to have on society, the role I'd like to play, the part I want to play in this, in everything that you do, is this taking me closer or is it taking me further? And it will be one of the two, and even every like little tiny decision, right? It's like, I kind of want to, binge watch a TV series. Is that taking me closer or is that taking me further? Now, I'm not saying don't binge watch TV series. I'm just as guilty of it as anyone else. Sometimes that's actually necessary. And sometimes it does actually take you closer because you need to decompress. And if you don't decompress, then, you'll mess with yourself. But it's get a sense as to the overall direction, trajectory that you want to move in, and then assess your more immediate decisions on, does this take me in the right direction or not? And if it's taking you in the right general direction, brilliant. There's no need to close down doors or be more specific, as long as it's moving you in the right place.
And you obviously have a very enlightened perspective of this. I'm very curious to
I don't know about that.
I'm serious. A lot of hitting walls and going through it to actually come up and say, this is how it, this is my experience in it. You've gone through some stuff, I see. But tell me a little bit about how you got there in a way. I know that you were one of the brilliant people who took a gap year after, I think, finishing secondary school before even college. You were a fruit picker. I think that is super cool. I come from a place where gap years are occasionally criminal. I had a friend whose parents sent her to college right after high school because they were worried she'd forget how to write if she waited more than a month. So you can see that I'm very intrigued by this. Tell me about the decision to do that and how your life was like at that point and what you were looking at.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. Again, it was something that emerged. There are a number of sort of moments in my life where decisions were made actually in quite a short period of time, and very instinctively. Where I had the option where I could defer my university place for a year, and candidly, at that time. So the context was I hadn't gotten into the university I wanted to get into. Right, I didn't get it. I didn't get in. I wanted to go to York, and I didn't get that. And that was tough. And it was interesting because like when I reflect back, I think my path would have been very different if I had, because I'd have been so excited about going that I might not have taken a gap year. But I took the gap year because I had the opportunity to, very, very straightforward in that, I was planning on going out to New Zealand for a holiday with family. And the idea emerged was like, well, why not I just stay?
The weather's good. I'm just going to stay for a while.
Yeah, rather than go for like 2-3 weeks, why don't I just stay? I could defer for a year and I could go traveling. I could do that. And so I made that decision, and it was a very gut kind of thing. And I could have changed my mind on it till very last minute. I could have gone, oh no, I do want to come in this year to Plymouth University, and it would have been fine. So it was quite a snap kind of gut decision. But it's one of the best decisions I've ever made, because I think taking a gap year, that if I got anything from it, it was really understanding the value of education. When you get out and you're not in it, you're too close to it for so long in our lives. Understanding the value of it and knowing when I get back into going to university, I really want to take this seriously now, because I see how this can carry out. And, I suddenly learned the value of languages. I learned the value of, all these things where I hadn't really taken them particularly seriously before. But now it's like, oh, okay, if I could talk French, Italian, German and stuff, man, that would be really handy in being able to make really good friends with a bunch of people I would have met when traveling. I would still made friendships, but especially from, people don't expect Brits or Americans to know how to speak other languages. So it's a very, they set a very low bar for us. They sort of, there's an assumption that this white middle-class male probably doesn't speak any other languages. And if you do, then that's seen very well. So I think I learned a lot of the value of education. And when I went, and then I caught the travel bug. So then I wanted to do an exchange year, and I did an exchange year to Canada as the second year of my degree. And that got me involved in a whole bunch of stuff where I started being able to do stuff in neuroscience labs and things like that. And all of a sudden, my CV, even at that stage, stood out from the majority of students, because I'd done this gap year, but that had taken me to do this exchange year. Where I'd been doing neuroscience studies and various things, and it led to me getting an amazing placement opportunity. I did a placement year as well at the National Hospital of Neurology and Neurosurgery in London, and I didn't even apply there. There wasn't.
They were just like, "You're so amazing, come work here."
No. It's far more random than that. It's not. So this is kind of the beauty of it. So I emailed a bunch of people of professors at the University of College London. Where all of I wanted to try my hand at doing neurological research, because I still am fascinated by it. So I wanted to try that. And so I was emailing all of these neuroscientists and all these neurology professors to say, hey, could I come and be like an exchange research student for you? I even emailed like every neuroscientist at Harvard. Like I cast a very, very wide net. I sent emails all left, right, and center with my CV and just say, hey, I'd be really interested in blah, blah, blah. Barely any responses, mostly no's. And then one of the people I emailed was a consultant neurologist called Diane Playford, who she didn't even respond to my email. All that she did was, unbeknownst to me, she forwarded my email on to the lead clinical psychologist at the National Hospital of Neurology and Neurosurgery, where she was a professor at UCL, but she was also a consultant there. So she forwards my email on with the only word saying, this one looks interesting. That was it.
High praise.
And the beauty of it was that they were at a stage where they were considering they'd never had an undergraduate placement student before, but they were reaching the point where they were kind of thinking about it, but they hadn't started looking. So I didn't have any competition.
So this was very serendipitous for you and them. It was like, oh gosh, we sent the thought out. Now he's here. We kind of have to take him. We asked the university live it.
Well, it was certainly serendipitous for me. I can't speak for them, but it worked out very, very well for me, because I had no competition to get it. Because this is a University College London hospital. I was at Plymouth University. You'd have thought they'd have been going for a University College London student.
Yeah, you'd think they'd go to the university, but yeah.
But they weren't doing a recruitment. They weren't recruiting for our role. It just sort of emerged. And so there was a lot of uncertainty for a long time, where they were like, umming and ahhing, are we, aren't we, are we, aren't we, are we, aren't we? And they ended up, going with it. But but there's a thing about luck, right? Like that's lucky. It's lucky, but when people often use the word luck, they're using it in place of chance. And I think chance is absolutely a thing. There's a huge amount of chance that has gone on there and has gone on in various different things that happened in my life. But the luck is an active process. And often the people who get seen as lucky, I imagine, Harsha, you are probably someone who has had various things for you as well happen where friends, family, and people, oh, you're so lucky that situation has happened, or that you managed to get that place, or you managed to get that part-time job, or you managed to set up that initiative. Oh, you're so lucky with all the things that you're doing. And it's an active process. If you're putting yourself out there, in order to have a lucky situation, you first got to actually be out there to be found. If you're sitting at home, it's not knocking on the door. It's not. Then once you're out there to be found, you've actually got to be looking. You've got to have your head on a swivel, because most people, or a large number of people, miss opportunities every day in conversations. There's been some really fascinating studies on it, where sort of this superstition thing of people think they're unlucky. Most of the time, you can throw opportunities at them and they just don't see them. You can put $100 bill on the sidewalk in front of them and they'll walk straight over it. You can put their phone number on a phone number and their name on the side of a bus saying, Harsha, call this number and we'll give you $1,000. And they just won't see it because they're not looking. They're not open to what's going on in the world around them. So you've got to be open to opportunity. You've got to be looking for it. And then once you see it, you've actually got to seize it, which sounds like not a big thing, but it is. It's often with some of these things, it takes courage to sort of kind of go, you know what, I want that. I've seen there's something here, whether that be in a conversation. If you're a student who's looking for a job opportunity, you might feel bad about, I don't want to ask for this, or it feels awkward. Whereas actually, if you just come out and said it, you might have been pleasantly surprised. You've got to seize those opportunities when you see them. So it's an active process, and those who are often seen as most lucky, there tends to be a bit of a method to the madness, and it's cumulative, because the more little bits and things that have happened over time, it adds up. I put a huge amount of time, days upon days upon days of freely organizing events, organizing talks, organizing all sorts of different things for free, just volunteering, doing stuff exactly as you're doing now, Harsha. And when you start getting into the thing where it just becomes this cascade of opportunities that just start coming out, people sort of forget that you did have to do all of that groundwork before all of that started happening. They go, well, how do I do that? Well, go and organize events for free for 5 years.
No, I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with that sentiment. I think number one, like my mentor used to say, luck is opportunity meets preparation. So yes, there's lots of opportunities out there, but you've got to be ready for it. And the second thing that he'd always say is that there's no wasted effort, and that if you give to like whatever you can do for someone, if you give first, naturally it will come back in some way or another. And I remember for many years, I've run my social enterprise for 7 years now, and in the beginning it was just really doing things for free, going out there, helping wherever we can, driving until we ran out of money for petrol, in a sense, and doing all of this work. But there was really the foundations to today, what we're doing 7 years later, when we have an international organization. And I think many people see the end product and they're like, I want to be there. But they forget all of the times which you're called crazy, and all of the times that you've done amazing things that looks like they're not going anywhere, in a sense. And you have many projects that you have given so much to the community. I think we were just talking earlier about one project that actually brought you to to Parliament, actually, I think, to the government, in a sense, and that was the accumulation, I think, of many efforts. Tell me about that, in a sense.
Yeah, so I first started sort of really getting involved in networking when I was doing some postgrad studies on management, and I happened to get involved with the Institute of Directors, and it was the amount of serendipity that sort of feeds in through that. and the cascade that created is kind of hard to fathom. And the thing is, when you think of it like a tree, there are lots of branches, and most of them don't lead anywhere. But the ones that do can be really magical. Like that sort of one conversation leads to that conversation, that conversation, that conversation. And when you map back from, when, being at the Houses of Parliament or doing a TEDx talk, when I map back every conversation, every person I had to meet, every situation I had to find myself in order for that to have happened, there are a remarkable number of ways that it might never have done. And in fact, I was able to, with the TEDx talk, I was able to trace back, and I worked out that there were lots of points of failure, but there was all these like parallel strands that were sort of traveling out, and then combined and converged to this opportunity to do a TEDx talk. And when I mapped it all the way back, I realized that there was a single point of failure for all of the different strands, which was a conversation with a student at a London South Bank University networking event, where if I hadn't taken that conversation seriously with a student, then none of the rest of it would have happened. And it would have been very easy to do. I was working at the time. I was doing postgrad studies. It'd be very easy to sort of discount any value that I could get from talking with undergraduate students and other people at the university. But I was curious, and I enjoy meeting people, and I was starting to get into this idea of, it's not about what you know, it's who you know. And if you aren't born with a family or school network that brings those kinds of opportunities to you, you've kind of got to build your own. One conversation there fundamentally changed my life. I realized in retrospect, and I've since told Fabian, the guy, I'm still in touch with him. But that conversation, really a simple conversation, wasn't anything intense. It's just that he introduced me to someone from something that I had no awareness of. And if he hadn't done that, none of the rest of it would have happened. And so I think the House of Parliament thing was an Institute of Directors event. So this was after I got involved with the Institute of Directors and the Young Directors Forum. And I was just giving my time to help organize events, help organize things for entrepreneurs, for young directors. We organized lots of events. We organized pitching competitions and all sorts of things. But it was the 10th anniversary of the Young Directors Forum. And so we decided that we'd go big, and we organized an event at the Houses of Parliament. And I led that project, which after a year of, really throwing myself into this. And I was in my sort of first role out of university. I was doing a graduate management scheme at a healthcare startup. And I had time to be able to invest in doing other things. Like, I wasn't super pressured left, right, and center. I didn't have kids. I don't have responsibilities. So I was able to invest my free time. But, where it's the choices you make about where you invest your time and your energy. And I spent a lot of time on things that I found I enjoy. I consider them still to be a major part of my social life. I met my best friend through LinkedIn. But there's a major part of my social life, but it is something which is it creates opportunities, and it sort of magnifies itself.
I'm gonna
that was from House of Parliament.
The one at the House of Parliament.
Yeah, that was a good day.
No, very cool. And I like the way that you've explained it in a sense. I think recently there's been a rise in all of these multiverse movies, so I can see kind of the context of how one decision kind of makes a difference it has a completely different outcome in life and all of that. One thing that
I just wish I had the full map, because the things I don't know, I can't because I can remember that because good stuff happened, right? But what I can't remember is all of the conversations which didn't go anywhere. And it would be fascinating to have a genuine map of every conversation that hasn't led anywhere, because I guarantee you there will be 1,000 for, probably for every one conversation that has really led to a fundamental, like, lots of things lead to little things and little opportunities and stuff. But for something that's led to a massive sort of life sort of defining moment, 1,000 to 1.
I think you're giving me a little bit of an existential crisis here, like how many little conversations could have led to something that I was not aware of in a sense, or that you just kind of miss in a sense. That's very stressful. Why?
It's sliding doors. Have you done? If you've seen that film, that movie, Sliding Doors, where just really little changes. So if I had one sort of superpower, I'd love to have the ability to sort of go back and see what would have happened if what happened if I didn't go to New Zealand, what would happen if I didn't go to Canada, what would happen if those binary moments in our lives where it's going one way or another, what would have happened if I'd be fascinated to sort of relive it and just sort of see what the different trajectory would have been.
Yeah, the movie that comes to mind for me is Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think that's what it's called. You they have that. You'd love it. If this is your superpower wish list, then oh my god. Tell me also a bit about like one of the things that I really like that you mentioned in that TEDx talk, and just for context of the TEDx talk, I'm gonna put up the photo here and so we can all get into the potential front seat of your stage and observing that in a way. And for the rest of you, go watch the video later. But one of the things that I really like is you say something like, we don't realize that networking is not something that is like, it's not always going to be something blaringly obvious. These conversations, these opportunities are not something that somebody's going to yell at you, hey, here's an opportunity. It's kind of embedded in the nuances of conversation, and it's kind of very subtly, you've kind of got to dig them out in a sense. How did you realize that in your own experiences? Where did you realize, or what experience or situation made you realize that for yourself?
I mean, there's a whole array of things, and fundamentally it's about finding something about the person that you find genuinely interesting, because chances are if you find it genuinely interesting, then you kind of are interested in exploring more about it. It's the thing I will say is it is a lot easier to do this when you know the value that you can bring. So these days it's much easier for me to find within the nuances of conversations opportunities, because I kind of know what opportunities I'm kind of interested in and looking for. So it's been made a lot easier now where, with Planet Mark, we're looking to support organizations with their carbon footprints. We want to help them reduce their carbon footprints. And so that's, when I know that that's kind of one of the things I'd like to see if there's an opportunity around, it makes it a lot easier because I've got a clear thing that I'd kind of like to find out where they're at with, and I've got a really clear solution to that problem. If they're experiencing it. So I think so it is made a lot easier. But outside the context of that, really it's paying attention. It's finding, in any conversation that you have with people will be facing challenges, whether they be personal, professional, whatever. And in their businesses, particularly if you're talking to entrepreneurs and stuff, there will be challenges that they're facing. And if you have skills that can help address those challenges, then you'll be able to find opportunities. And so, an example of this this is within the first year of me starting to sort of network. And bear in mind, at this point, I'm doing postgrad studies at London South Bank University. I'm doing a graduate management scheme. I'm not in a senior kind of, I'm certainly not a director.
You're one of us. Okay, back then, long ago, yeah.
No, I still am. I very much still am. There is no distinction. But I did not have the confidence I would have now that I have value to bring to a conversation or something. I was much more nervous about what value can I possibly bring to these conversations. And I had a conversation with the CEO of Mercedes, Benz, big, huge car manufacturer, right? And I bumped in, just was at a networking event. And so you don't have long to think about it. You're not prepared for it. It's just sort of like, oh, hi, love to meet you.
Yeah.
What do you do? Oh, well, I'm the CEO of Mercedes-Benz. Oh, hi. What can I, mere mortal possibly say that would have value to this, demigod of the CEO of Mercedes-Benz? There's so much more experience than me. They're so much wiser than me. What could I possibly say to help? And I still hadn't. This was one of the things that I reflect back on that led to me learning this thing, but I wasn't well versed in it at the time. But I just instinctively steered the conversation onto a topic that I was kind of familiar with and just curious about. Where literally the day before, I'd had a marketing lecture, about audience segmentation, marketing segmentation. How do you split up audiences to target them in different ways, right? And I just had a whole 3-hour lecture on it the day before. I'd studied it in a textbook. I was as well versed in the academia of that particular niche subject as I could be at that point. And I sort of asked the question, I'd be really interested to learn more about how Mercedes approach it. How do you approach your sort of customer segmentation? What do you do? And when you do something like that, one of two things will happen. Either you're about to learn something because they're going to school you in the practical applications of what you just learned in class, or you're going to have an opportunity to add value because, funnily enough, she might be the CEO of Mercedes-Benz, but she hasn't been to university in however, God knows how long. She hasn't sat in a lecture about marketing segmentation in a long time, might not have a marketing background at all. And in reality, what ended up happening was she sort of went, oh, that's actually, we're having a bit of a challenge with that at the moment. One of the things we're trying to work out is we're trying to figure out how to position Mercedes with a millennial audience. I'd be really interested to hear your sort of thoughts and reflections upon that. And all of a sudden, I was in a position where I could meaningfully contribute, just because I'd read it in a textbook and had a lecture on it. I could meaningfully contribute. Oh, well, have you thought about this? Have you done what surveying and what things have you done to understand what millennials want? I was able to engage in that conversation in quite, a detailed way that creates this kind of halo effect where she sort of, I think she came away with the impression that I knew a lot more about marketing than I actually did. Because I just knew one thing about that niche subject. If she had tested me on anything else to do with marketing, I'd have sucked. But I knew that. And so I was able to have a very interesting and engaging conversation with that person purely off the back of I steered it onto something that was interesting and that I knew a bit about. So I think that's steering yourself onto familiar ground could be helpful. Or if you're just a curious soul, steer yourself onto deliberately unfamiliar ground and ask lots of questions if you sense that that's something that someone will do. But it can be harder to find opportunities when you're just off-piste, because you'll learn lots of interesting things, but finding a way that you can engage with them, if it's like, if I'm having a conversation with someone and they're telling me all about, I don't know, how they love BMX biking, it's going to be fascinating. I'm going to enjoy the conversation, but I don't necessarily know I'm going to be able to add much value to that person's BMX biking enthusiasm.
That's a good way to put it. I remember a joke someone told me when I was very concerned, like, oh, should I study this in university? Should I study that at university? What would I learn? And someone said, well, at the very least, you'd learn how to make small talk on a bunch of random things, and that's the value that you'd get in a way. But beyond that joke, in a sense, one of the things that I completely agree with is, if you truly do something, like if you're truly immersed in something that you like, in a sense, and as long as you can relate that to whatever conversation you're having in some way or another, you become not the expert, but you become a contributor in a sense. And I think so many of us have value to bring to conversations that we don't know just by our own perspective. Like I know recently, a lot of the Gen Zs I work with, they're young, many of them are school students, and they meet these CEOs and their company owners and all of that. And the conversation can always be steered back into what are you guys doing to engage my generation? What are you guys doing in a sense to bring Gen Z into the conversation? And they immediately become experts in that simply because they know that generation by virtue of being part of it in a way. Yeah. I think there's so many ways to steer that conversation that you have very brilliantly articulated. And I love your whole, I would say, like I loved your whole TED talk on meaningful networking. I thought it was very, very relevant. I think the last time we spoke as well, during our pre-call, you mentioned of the story of how you got your current position at Planet Mark as well. And that was also through a networking serendipitous moment. Tell us a little bit about that story. How did you get to your current position, to where you are right now?
Well, I mean, I'd sort of been in the orbit of Planet Mark for a couple of years before joining.
Orbit of the planet, yeah. Like
yes, that worked quite well, didn't it? Definitely not intentional. I met the CEO of Planet Mark, a chap called Steve. I met him through, I was operations director of a startup and full startup, not making very much money at all. Startup. We had a lot of fun. We organized big running events, walking events, cycling events, and stuff. We organized like running events with like 1,000 runners and stuff. It was a lot of fun. And the founder and CEO of it was called Your Town. We met Steve because Planet Mark, one of the things we do is we also support on social value creation of companies. So we help them understand and measure in pounds and pence what the social value created by their organization has been over the last year. And so where we were working on a bit of a social enterprise kind of thing, where we were getting corporates to sponsor, running events in their local town and things like that, we were quite interested in Planet Mark for the Planet Mark community. Would they be interested in helping us organize running? So we were having a meeting, sort of looking, how can we collaborate? And Steve and I just sort of got on really well. And my institute directors thing, I think, interested him. And so he and I just started keeping in touch, and would, every 2 or 3 times a year we'd meet up for a coffee, and I would just share thoughts and like learn more about what they were doing, what they were up to, how things were going, and would share my thoughts and reflections on things that I knew something about, like digitization, building communities. I was just freely and openly sharing my thoughts and reflections. And so we kept on sort of, having a conversation, and he would invite me to all of their events. And so I went along to their awards, for example, every year. And with the awards that I would go along as just a random person who had come to the awards, and we would, which was, there are photos of the Planet Mark team back then with me in them.
So you were just in the peripheral until it was just like,
I was just there. I was just there. I was just a big fan. I wasn't working at a Planet Mark member. I wasn't in no way was I related on that. I was a fan of what they were doing. And I liked, I got on well with Steve, and I liked the team. I enjoyed it. And so much so that they actually invited me onto a team training session where it was only Planet Mark team at it, and they invited me along to it. I still don't know what was going through Steve's head, but I mean, he's sort of like, well, I sort of knew we wanted to work together and stuff. And I went along and had like a half a day of training on sustainability with their own team. And
we've got an empty spot. What about that guy who keeps showing up? Let's get him on.
Yeah. So it was one where it was a relationship I'd invested a lot in, because I didn't have a particular outcome in mind. Mm-hmm. I sort of knew I wanted to move in the direction of sustainability. I had this growing realization, and it was like an itch that I wasn't scratching, to work on sustainability, and really realizing that this was something I cared passionately about, and I really wanted to invest more of my time and energy into. So I was networking. I was getting an understanding of the sector and what, who did what and what sort of a role would I like to play in it. And in the end, a little over 2 years ago, in May 2020, Steve dropped me a text on a Sunday saying, have you got time for a quick chat? And I called him straight back going, no time like the present, what do you want? and he was like, well, we've been talking about wanting to work together for a really long time, and I think we're at the stage now where we need your skill set. Would you be willing to come on board? And I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. I didn't really, he was like, obviously take time to think about it. I don't need to think about it. It's a yes, Steve. And ironically, I was in this sort of weird place where I was about to I was on a 6-month contract with Imperial College, rolling out a new research center looking at smart home technology for dementia, which is amazing. It was a lot of fun. And they just offered me a 5-year contract to remain with the center for a long period of time and to project manage it and steer it. And I'd made the decision that I was going to turn that down. Even before anything else had come up. I was like, I want to get into sustainability. Now is the moment to do it. I really want to do this. And then Steve texted me. So it was a bit weird.
No, I think it's brilliant. And there's a few things that I personally really like that I just wanted to kind of draw out is number one, you seem to be a person who really follows your heart and your gut in this kind of stuff. In a sense, it's like, if the gut says sustainability, I'm not going to get tempted by the other stuff, in a sense, which I think takes a lot of courage, and I think I'm amazed, and I personally wish that if the opportunity presents itself, I would be as firm and as thoughtful about it.
I'll say people who know me would see me as a massive opportunist, and so I'm not always good at saying no to things, and what I've gotten a lot better, but that's been partially learned and partially forced, where I just don't have the time that I used to. So it's a learned thing, and in terms of trusting that gut, because of the number of times where it's gone wrong, and I've sort of gone, I kind of knew that wasn't going to work, both in professional and personal life. I think over time people learn to trust their gut more, because often it's got a pretty good sense of where something's going to go.
And I like how you didn't wait like for a particular role. You just found a group of people, found something that resonated, and you're like, I'm just going to keep hanging out here every now and then. If it works,
I was hanging out in a lot of other spaces as well, I should note. I was doing a course, a remote course with Cambridge University with the Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership. I had lots of networking stuff through that. So during that same period of time where Steve had texted me, I actually had about 7 or 8 different opportunities that suddenly presented themselves kind of out the blue, which led to me doing the collaborations with Disney's head of innovation and creativity, and setting up my own company to run virtual events and things like that, which I'd been doing on the side for the past 2 years as well. So a huge, and there was a whole bunch of others as well, but where I got asked to help set up a sustainability startup in healthcare around helping, basically bringing together all of the big pharma companies to create an accord for getting them all to sign up to net zero and be more sustainable, which also would have been amazing. So I've had to learn to say no.
You talk a little bit about kind of the cascading effect of opportunities, where at first you put a lot of energy out there, you go and you try as many things, and then when it hits a point or a turning point where suddenly all of the fruits and all of the things come back at the same time. At that time, in a sense, now that we're a little bit further along the conversation, at that time when you have 7 different opportunities, when you've invested your network, your time, your energy in seeing all of these things kind of grow, how do you pick? Like what was your like do you have a metric secret algorithm? Do you just take a dartboard and just like throw like line up the opportunities and see where it lands? Or like how do you pick?
If there are multiple opportunities that I've been interested in the past, historically, the way it would work is I would keep doors open for as long as I reasonably could. So if there are multiple things, if I could keep them sort of open while I was figuring things out and getting a sense, and really what you're trying to do is you're trying to build up data for yourself, and that data informs your gut instinct. And eventually, at the end of the day, we like to think that we make very rational decisions. Most of our decisions, including the big ones, are made emotionally. And what you kind of have to do is you have to give yourself the space and the time and the information to feed that emotional gut instinct with the most useful information that it has. That's why if you're trying to make a decision between 2 things, pick one and see how you react to it emotionally. Like roll a dice, and if you go, oh, then you know that you didn't want that one, and you wanted the other one. But you've got to kind of feed yourself the information and give yourself the time to dwell on it and to let your subconscious process it and think about it. And it's not always straightforward. And things can evolve massively, and you can be open to having your mind changed. But it's more of an art than a science, I would say. And you're not always going to get it right, but we don't get to explore the other path.
Back to our superpower that
we're exactly
inspiring to get, in a sense. But I can definitely see the psychology student in you in kind of how you've laid that down, in a sense. And I wholeheartedly agree. I think that sometimes it's just about like we have a physical digestion process. I feel we have an emotional and an intellectual digestion process as well, where you get all the information, and then you've just got to not sit on it, but you've got to just let the decision come to you, in a sense. And
And to a certain extent, that's what experience and expertise are. That's what older generations have over us. The reason that they can often, they are experts in things is because they've built up enough data over time that they have shortcuts, and they can make a very clear decision on an issue with a limited amount of information and data, precisely because they've sort of seen something kind of like it before. And their gut goes.
It's like an AI in a sense, like yes, you said, the stuff.
To a certain extent,
you feed the algorithm makes better kind of decisions based on the experiences and the information.
Yeah, so, crudely, yeah, and that's why it's that whole thing around 10,000 hours, and the stuff around how you learn and develop yourself, and that's also the reason why there, as you alluded to earlier, where there are certain things where if you're building a consultancy about how to reach Gen Z, who's the experts on that? Probably the ones who've been in it for the longest, i.e. Gen Z. And similarly, there are whole industries like social media marketing and things like that have emerged where they're headed up by very young people. Why? Because the young people they've spent more time on the damn things than older generations. And that's not a bad thing, or it's just that young people had free time, which was invested in learning what worked well and what didn't on social media, whilst the older generations were busy working. And so they haven't had the time to do this stuff. And it's why, there's a great book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, where he sort of looks at, there's some really crazy things where I'm going to get this wrong, but like there's a number of like the big tech founders like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and a number of the other sort of magnates at the top of billion-dollar companies. And he's like, what would you say if I told you that they were all born within 6 months of one another?
That makes sense after like your previous point in a way,
and it's this whole thing of the trajectory that people are on, and why? Well, because they were at the perfect age where they were 21 years old when the first personal computer came out. 21 years old, which means that they were old enough to be taken somewhat seriously. They weren't 12-year-olds trying to set up a tech company. But equally, they were young enough. They weren't already working at IBM or something in computer programming, sneering on this. Oh, why would I spend my time on this weak little personal computer when I'm an IBM employee and I work with this massive room warehouse-sized computer that is so much more powerful? I'm not going to waste my time with this personal computer nonsense. And so, they were at the perfect moment. And is that do they get credit for that? No, someone was going to do it. Hard work is a prerequisite. You have to do the hard work, otherwise it doesn't happen. But there are so many instances that he shares in the book where it's like there's lots of people who do all of the prerequisites. They put in the effort, they work hard, they're really talented, they're really, and they don't achieve those things. And the thing that really sank home with me for Outliers is that we have to stop placing individuals on pedestals. When we look at people like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, yeah, sure, they're cool people. They're great. And they've done some great things. But there are a lot of people who are just as talented, just as good, who don't get there. And so much of it is actually about the environment around them, the people around them. And what we need to do as a society is to create the environments that nourish and nurture these opportunities for people and for communities that can create these things like Microsoft emerging and things like that, but recognizing that it's not the credit doesn't go to one person. It's the culture that we've built. It's the structures that we've built that enabled that. And there's loads of really great examples of, the fact that sports, like ice hockey players, something like nearly half of ice hockey players are born between January and March. And only 10% are born between October and December.
That one I don't know. Is it because of the time where you're most likely to play like ice hockey is during the winter? Like, I don't know why.
So it's to do with seasons. So in ice hockey, the season starts in January. So if you want to join the under 16s team, then if you're born in January, you are an entire you might be a whole year older, nearly, than someone who's born in December, because they were 15 the previous year, so they couldn't join the under-16s team. So that you've had a whole additional 11 months to physically mature. And so where we're getting sports stars now being picked out at an earlier and earlier stage, you end up in this situation where if people are getting scouted at like the age of 5, 6, 7, if you are 11 months older than some of your peers, you are more physically and biologically developed than them. You have more coordination. You're physically stronger. You're more coordinated. You of course you're better. You've had another 11 months to practice. And that's at that stage of life, that those timeframes matter hugely. And so it creates this skew whereby those kids who are born between January and March might be told, oh, you're really good at ice hockey. You're really good at it. You're talented. Oh, we're going to get you more training. We're going to get you more support because you're talented. And the kids who might be younger, and the reason they're not as good isn't because they're not actually as talented. It's just they haven't had as much chance to practice and they're not as physically big, matured, or coordinated. And so they get told they're not good. And both those things become reinforcing cycles whereby you're told you're good at it, so you do more of it, and then you get special extra training and special extra support and coaching, and you end up building up those people, and they'll look back on it and be, oh, well, I was always meant to be a hockey player. You might not have actually been that good.
I mean, like if you gave the other kids an extra 6 months, I'm sure they'd catch up in a way.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that I really like about this whole conversation is the deconstruction of the concept of luck and the concept of kind of the serendipitous nature. Like, yes, some things are left to chance, but most things, like as you said, they're time based, or they're kind of you making your own opportunities if you don't have those advantages. As we kind of wind down, in a sense, if you could, in kind of our theme of being able to go back in time and see different decisions and how they unfold, if you could go back in time and you could tell yourself when you were growing up, in a sense, one thing that you think would change your life, what would that one piece of advice be, as we kind of wrap up, in a sense?
Invest in relationships.
Okay, now you've got to elaborate why.
I think relationships, professionally and otherwise, right? Like when we leave university and you first start your jobs and your career, you get told, invest in your pension. Invest in your pension. The miracle of compound interest means that the earlier you start investing in your pension, the miracle of compound interest means that it grows so much more. It's so much easier to grow it if you have a longer period of time to grow it over. And I would argue that exactly the same is true of relationships, and not just in like a crude financial sense of there'll be business opportunities or whatever, but actually in the emotional benefits, in the friendships that you'll form, and the wider societal sort of things that you'll get from it. And the earlier you start investing in connecting meaningfully with other people and seeking to add value and to be a good friend and to be a good family member and to be a good colleague, be a good peer, and connect with people and help people and just, form meaningful relationships that will last. The earlier you start doing that, there is a compounding effect on that, where those people introduce you to other people, you connect with other people, they become stronger and stronger relationships, especially like at university right now. You have no idea where some of your peers will go. I can tell Harsh is going places already, but there'll be others as well, where there'll be people who right now there'll be some like Harsh who are very switched on, doing really interesting things and stuff, and that's a sure bet. But there'll also be people who actually aren't that driven right now, but could go on to do just about anything. You have no idea. And so, invest in relationships, form, meaningful bonds with people, seek to add value, seek to help others, and it will always pay dividends, whatever frame of reference you want to use for that, whether it be karma or just luck or whatever it is, it does come back.
Very well said, and I think you've ended it on a very brilliant note as well. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been a very fun conversation, and I think I learned a lot. And I enjoyed talking to you and uncovering this myth called luck and serendipity through your experiences. And I just hope you had half the fun that I had speaking to us and the audience as well.
Awesome.
All right. So with that, thank you once again for joining us as our speaker. To our audience, thank you guys for watching and for tuning in for today's episode. If you guys like today's episode, make sure you come back again every Thursday at 10 p.m. ET. And don't forget to like, subscribe, let us know, share this episode with your friends so that we can continue growing and helping more people figure out how they can change their reality. And with that, this is us signing off for today. Bye.
Thanks.
You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.